Everyone, welcome. And then I want to say good afternoon. Welcome to our press conference the title is Yes, No, Maybe. Have grassroots women gained from COP28? So this is a question that we want to raise in this press conference. And then also, this is a reflection of our first week of the COP28 in Dubai from the perspective of the grassroots women. This press conference is co-organized by Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, APWLD. We have Roots for Equity from Pakistan. We also have Climate Watch Thailand. We have Aksi for Social, Gender, and Ecological Justice from Indonesia. We have Nepal Indigenous Women Forum from Nepal. We have Letana Nehan Women Development Agency from Papua New Guinea. We have Alga from Kyrgyzstan, and we have Fiji Women's Rights Movement from FWRM. This is a very important moment for us because we are all grassroots women organization. Our bias is grassroots women struggle. So that's why it is important to have our perspective in this press conference. So I'm going to start to say a little bit about myself. My name is Wadarina. I'm the Deputy Regional Coordinator of APWLD. And then we want to thank Women and Gender Constituency for their generous offer for us to use this pavilion. Beautiful, beautiful pavilion, right? Very beautiful pavilion for our press conference and our discussion. And then also, I would like to welcome all the feminist activists, media in the room. I know that some of our media is actually there in the Zoom because they cannot make it. But we also want to welcome our friends from the Environment Journalist Network who are also here. And then please feel free to use your comment box and chat. Yeah. And then also a little bit intro about APWLD. We are a feminist network. We are a regional from Asia and the Pacific. We are strive for cross-movement building to challenge structural forms of discrimination, including patriarchy, but not only patriarchy, but how patriarchy also colluded with capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, and also fundamentalism and militarism. So we are wanting to see things from the structural point of view. We aim for women's human rights and development justice. And then when we are talking about justice, that's my entry, is actually right now for those people who are joining the negotiation, you know that the word justice has been debated, contested, discussed, right? And then, for instance, our conversation and the just transition pathway have been very much, really look into what is justice means for developing countries, for developed countries. Even Saudi Arabia said that what is unjust transition means for them, right? So for us, we want to have our own definition on justice from the grassroots women's perspective. What is justice? What really means for us, grassroots women, who in daily basis actually needs to pay the brunt of this climate emergency, who oftentimes get displaced by the so-called climate solutions or climate projects that we see, who are oftentimes, most of the time, get harassed, arrested, and even killed, and merely because they want to actually protect the environment, protect their land, and protect their resources. And then which lead me to the question, have grassroots women really gained already from the negotiation of the COP28? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Is it a maybe? Okay, so we will listen to our speakers. I will introduce the speaker one by one. I want to know their thoughts on this. So first is, I'm going to call on Azra. Azra, you can speak there, unless you want to stand, up to you. Okay, you can sit there. Azra Talat Sayeed is from Roots for Equity. She's APWLD long-standing member, works with peasant women and peasant also in rural areas of Pakistan. Azra currently also sits in International Women's Alliance, or IWA, Azra. Yeah, and then that has been very focal in resisting different manifestation of imperialism, be it through occupation, be it through military bases, or be it through trade and economic agreements. So Azra now is the active member of FEWLD in our program that we call WITCH, Women Interrogating Trade and Corporate Hegemony. That is WITCH. So Azra, tell us, what is your say about this? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is it a maybe?
It's a very clear no. Let there be no confusion. There is no yes, there is no maybe, it's a no. And I say that, I think I don't even need to say, if you walk around, the many thousands of people who are supposed to be registered here, how many of them are rural women? How many of them, even if they are here, like 0.1%, can find spaces where their voices are heard? This place is so unfriendly in its layout to all of us who are quite literate and are able to move around, but we are lost. We are lost physically, and we are totally lost in the negotiations as well. Rural women must be one of the frontline decision makers, implementers on climate justice. So when we talk about justice, what does it mean for us as rural women, for the women who work on the land, who till the soil, who are responsible for bringing nutrition and nurturing the whole society, the whole global society, rest on the shoulders of women, and they are absent from this menu. Now, what does it mean in the larger context of COP28? Let me say this, that agriculture is the key to the world. Without food, there can be no life on earth. Without preserving biodiversity, which is a critical role of agriculture, of the rural women, of the indigenous women, there can be no biodiversity and there can be no earth without saving biodiversity. We have friends sitting here from the indigenous communities from across Asia Pacific, and in the whole COP28, we have many indigenous people from all over the world. There is no recognition of these people, their contribution to what they do for us. I would also like to say that we do not forget livestock. You know, livestock is responsible for biodiversity, for the manure it provides for nourishing the earth, the very earth from which we need to take our food. Livestock is responsible for food, for milk, for nearly every part of society, leather, clothes, everything comes from livestock as well. And the corporate world is now talking about, I was at a meeting of the World Economic Forum some days back, and they were talking about, eggs produced not from chicken, just from nowhere. Chicken produced without any feathers. That is not agriculture. That is commodification of the extreme sense of this digital technology, of what we call genetic engineering. All of this is in the realms of monopoly capital. And agrochemical PNCs are the worst. I would like to draw your attention to militarization as well. Rural people, rural women, peasants, indigenous people cannot be delayed from the word militarization, because it is our lands that the military industrial complex, the great defense industry of the big G7 countries are out there to control our land. Right now, as we sit here, we know that a region very close to this, very, very close, is being bombarded to hell. So many thousands of people with their necks slapped, with their hands cut, their legs amputated, their stomachs out. And this is militarization just for the sake of getting our land. It is not only in this region, it is also in the Asia region. I come from Pakistan. We are seeing this in every part of the world where they are trying to get indigenous land, the rural communities' land, and that is based on fossil fuel. Agriculture cannot be based on fossil fuel. We have to get rid of fossil fuel out of it. I would like to talk about a part of what is happened in my country. We call it the interstate dispute settlement mechanism, just so that the Canadian and the Australian corporations can mine gold from our land. They sued the government of Pakistan for $6 billion, a country which is deluged with floods. Just last year, it was such a huge flood, 1/3 of my country was underwater. The women were without land, were without food, without shelter, in very, very precarious conditions. And we are a country which is responsible for only 1%, less than 1% of carbon emissions. It is on a country like Pakistan that the IFI, the really imperious institutions of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and then to couple it with the World Trade Organization, which is responsible for very, very savage, brutal trade agreements that they come to take away what we sow, what we reap. They make sure that we do not have control over what is grown on our land. So the ISDS was responsible for making the state of Pakistan kneel down to its obligations. And we were sued for $6 billion. Is this justice? For us, justice means what? It means genuine agrarian land reforms, land to the tillers, especially to the women. Right now in my country, due to patriarchy, only 2% women have land. Only 2%. And 5% very rich feudal lords control 67% of land. So for us, genuine agrarian reforms, agroecology, seed sovereignty, control and access to all natural resources means justice. And that is very closely entwined with climate justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Azra, for pointing the injustices, but also the justice, what justice means, especially for the person, which is like genuine agrarian reform and land to the tiller, the seed sovereignty, agroecology, and everything. So the second question, the second speaker will be Wanun Permpibul. She is from Climate Watch Thailand. You've seen Wanun, I think, a lot of times. In side event, in action, she's going to the negotiation also. Right now, what we are going to ask to Wanun is about what is the current negotiations situation, Wanun, and then also, especially in relation with the grassroots women's demands, and then also what is actually the situation with the climate financing and fall solution that is happening on the ground.
Thank you, Badai. And I'd like to continue from Azra. Yes, rural communities and rural women are here. And those who are here are making the whole decision and also the design of what the future is going to be like for those women on the ground. Let me tell you 4 things about what I have noticed for the first week. We've been talking a lot about how not to tackle the fossil fuels. And then you'll see a lot of fossil fuel lobbyists and corporations related to the energy sector and also fossil fuels. They're the biggest amount, the biggest number here in this talk. And they're really big, and you've seen them. They are just a big elephant in the room already. But you are not talking and trying to get them to do something. They are also trying to get a way out of it. So there are ways for them to look and to go for how to continue that positive. So the first one of my point is there'll be a lot of deviation from the real solution of climate change. So they've been talking about how to get away from fossil fuels, but then continuing the use of fossil fuels. Let me name it. They're talking about carbon capture and storage, which is a very dangerous geoengineering and also technology. They're also talking about hydrogen and ammonia, which is also, they call it emerging new technology, that are also harmful. Why not talking about phasing out of all fossil fuels? So why not tackling all those big elephants in the room? And also, Azra was just talking about agriculture. I have another point in terms of why and how agriculture has been dragged into the fall solution. What Azra has already presenting was food is from agriculture. And if you have no food, it's not going to be any living. The world has to move on. And food has been badly impacted by climate impact. We name it disasters and also prolonged drought and also flooding. But while we're talking about how to build resilience in the agriculture, why not providing funding and grant-based finance for agriculture to adapt? So that means adaptation. But why I'm talking about agriculture as a source of methane emission, and then that leads to the reduction of the methane. Why you have the big elephant already in the room, but now I'm talking about mitigating and also reducing methane emission from the food sector. So that's what I mean deviation from the real solution. And now the second one is the finance. That's been a whole lot and a big issue on the finance maybe. The first one on my finance is developed countries and those rich countries fail to deliver the what we call it. I want to say something about 100 billion. It's a long story of the 100 billion USD a year, but they fail to deliver. So now we are in this. We still need to demand for it. And then they're talking about the how to mobilize 100 billion. So according to the UNFCCC article convention, it's already some definition of the climate finance already. So finance is an obligation of those developed countries. They call Annex 1, that means the rich countries. So right now we have seen the negotiation. Okay, let's define the climate finance. Let's talk about the definition of climate finance. So it's already the basis of it is already there. So now we see that there has been a delay in the negotiation, trying to get away from that obligation to provide the finance as a firm. So imagine if we all the developing countries and developed countries are talking about the definition of climate finance, we would spend another few years rather than to get who's going to be financing it, rather than getting the real money. So I mean, there have been tactics on that to delay the commitments and to pay for the climate that developed countries own. And also the loss and damage fund has been adopted this year, agreed at this COP on the first day. Some of the people are happy with the finance, with the money that has been put under pledges. Pledges is something. Delivery of the finance is also something. We need to really see how much is delivered. Unless those pledges get into the resource mobilization, that is the real money. And whether that is enough, we really need to push for it too. Because the impacts are already on the ground. There must be some compensation, and that compensation is under the law. And the last one on the finance is where the finance should be coming from. So there have been diversion as well, and also deviation from the rich countries' obligation to provide grant-based finance. They've been talking of mobilizing the finance from the private sector. And that means the private sector would also be giving the money, but then in what form? So we will have to pay for something that developing countries, and those women on the ground are not causing those climate change, but they are the ones that will impact. And then my last minute, is on another channel of the finance system. Finance has been proposed to be under the role of the market. So then we see that has been under the form of the false solution. Carbon credit is also providing the finance, but that is under the market mechanism. So countries will get the money when you are doing trading. That is not just at all, because developing countries in the global south are not even causing the climate impact. The real solution is to reduce the emissions at the root cause and those who are causing the climate impact. So you name it, and you've been hearing a lot in terms of the smart agriculture, smart climate agriculture, and also carbon trading, nitrogen that I've already talked before, carbon capture and storage. Those are to take off the responsibilities of the real solution. So what do we need as a just solution for women in the community? My women, farmers, and also fisher folk are already suffering from the climate impact. They are not just sitting there, not doing anything. They are using their own money, their own savings in order to survive. Is that a punishment to them? They have already been impacted by climate change, already vulnerable. But now you are taking money out of them to do something they are not positive. That is, to me, is really not just. So we really need to address those in this talk as well. And also what is just is to look at what women need and also provide the support and the finance that is needed by the women on the ground so that they would be spending on how to adapt themselves and how to also be part of the change agent in doing the mitigation measures.
Thank you. Give a clap. Thank you, Wanun. I think we heard from the experience of women farmers, fisherfolk. Wanun also mentioned that, and Passon. Right now, our next speaker, we're going to speak on the perspective from the indigenous women. So I'm going to introduce Audrey, right? Audrey from Inabuyuk, and then it's very interesting. Audrey is from Inabuyuk, Philippines, and Inabuyuk is a Kalinga term referring to the traditional practice of helping each other, right? Through collective cooperative work and exchange labor without monetary compensation. We heard a lot, no, about monetary, non-monetary. So we want to hear from Audrey. She's the regional alliance, the Inabuyuk is the regional alliance of women's organization in Cordillera, Philippines. And then mostly the membership mostly come from the ranks of grassroots women, mainly indigenous Passon women, who comprise the majority of women population in the Cordillera region, and also women workers, semi-workers, and women for urban poor communities. So Audrey, I give it to you to know your thoughts. Is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is it a maybe?
As mentioned, I am Audrey. I come from the northern part of the Philippines, the Cordillera, and I am an indigenous woman, land and environment defender. The Cordillera administrative region, my homeland, the ancestral domain of the Igorot people is rich in natural resources, right? Out of its total land area of 1.8 billion hectares, 35% is classified as forest land. It is also deemed as the watershed cradle of the northern Philippines because it hosts 13 major river systems serving our communities and neighboring areas as well. This was made possible because our ancestors valiantly fought every interest that would come into our ancestral territories that would negatively impact on our food systems and our ways of lives. And because of this, our region has always been viewed by the Philippine government, which is pushed by imperialist interests as a resource base for exploitation open at the expense of the welfare of our people. It has allowed the rapid entry of various development-driven projects, extractive, including mining and dams and the like in our ancestral territories. Majority of these projects are awarded to multinational corporations from the global north. Let's talk about mining. In the past, we let colonizers have a fair share of our minerals in line with our traditional values of community sharing, just like in Inabuyuk that was mentioned a while ago, not knowing that these colonizers will eventually take our act of kindness as an opportunity to dig our mountains and strip our forests naked or profit from our resources and develop an all-out large-scale corporate mining operations, which is later governed by multinational corporations. Now, we see our communities mined out, and we are forced to adapt to the changes in socioeconomic systems which are brought about by large-scale mining. Our lands are no longer productive. Our rivers are poisoned, and our water sources are drying out. Subsistence agriculture gradually disappeared, and our people are left with no choice but to live by the scraps of mining corporations, and in some cases work as contractual small-scale miners, even women, for the mining companies who give them a very small share of their earnings. With nothing left to hold our soil and our mountains, our communities experience killer landslides and life-threatening ground subsidence. And yet,
Those who are responsible for our demise deny themselves accountability in all these tragedies by claiming that these disasters are acts of God, and they pay meager amount of fines for the destruction that they have caused. Aside from mining, we have stories on exploitative energy projects. Our people let governments and corporations build mega dams, and they believed in the promises of relocation, monetary reparations, and delivery of better social services. Now we have communities who are helpless when dams burst in the flood, communities whose kinships are broken apart, and communities who are left to survive in relocation sites that are far from livable. My people's opposition to these so-called development projects has remained vibrant over the years. And in the whole struggle of the Cordillera peoples, indigenous women, land and environment defenders have always been at the forefront. This is mainly because the ancestral land, our ancestral territories, is where our identity as indigenous peoples is rooted. And so, care of the land, the ancestral land, the environment as a whole, the resources found within is embedded in our ways of life. And this naturally drives us to be defenders of land, life, and resources. This culture of defense continues to this day due to the systematic violations of our right to self-determination and the institutional discrimination directed against us. And as a result of this activism, in particular our collective voice and action in defense of our territories, our communities, we experience various rights violations. We see how basic human rights and social services are offered to us as incentives or even like privileges so long as we give our consent to this project, to the mining, to the dams. We see how militarism is used as a strategy to silence us when we register our opposition. We have experienced harassment, threats, criminalization, killings, bombings of our communities facilitated by the very forces who have sworn to protect us. Some of us can even no longer return to our communities due to the gravity of such situation, and our leaders, our elders, are called terrorists by our government for their vocal defense of our ancestral territories. And the cumulative effect of this situation affected the persistence of our indigenous practices. Indigenous practices of cooperation like Inabuyog and collective action like Upubu, and also our values like Inayan and Panilyo, or the admonition to do good in relating to individuals, to the community, to the environment. It has even become difficult to rely on our own kaiyan, on our own tribesmates for security when some of them are surveillance agents of the armed forces of the Philippines. Altogether, this contributes to the breakdown of community cohesion and solidarity. But this is not only happening in my homeland. This is happening all over the world. Our stories in the Cordilleras is a testament to the shared experiences of indigenous women, land and environment defenders around the globe. And for this reason, to answer your question, we believe that despite our victories in our long years of struggle as indigenous women, as the peoples in general, we remain sidetracked in the important conversations that is happening now. Why do we, indigenous women, land and environment defenders who are at the forefront of the battle for a more livable planet, have to feel so small in a conference that highlights matters we experience in our daily life? We do not even understand fully what is happening in the negotiations. And as the buzz around loss and damages and that transition is happening, we need to push for a more human rights approach on the negotiations that are happening. We need to put women and vulnerable communities at the heart of the negotiations, because when we talk about climate justice, there can never be climate justice without justice for the affected community, especially for indigenous women and environment defenders in general. And when we talk about justice, this essentially means recognizing the many wrongs that have been done to indigenous women, land, and environment defenders in our communities over the years. We also need to tackle how we, as women, land, and environment defenders, who in endure the impact of climate crisis are also subjected to different forms of attacks for simply standing up for our rights, for our communities, for our planet. This means that there should be an effective accountability mechanism so that violators of our rights, women, as indigenous peoples, are held accountable, thereby ending the impunity that violators are currently enjoying. Our global fight for climate justice hinges on defending our ancestral territories against plunder, against militarism. And this fight is not just ours alone. It is a shared battle of indigenous peoples, of rural communities, of women, in fact, of all peoples around the globe who are aspiring for a more humane and just world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey. I think that a lot of you probably will have a question or a discussion later on. But for now, I'm going to go directly to the next speaker. Yes, our next speaker. Yeah, our next speaker is Attiya Waris. She's a dear friend. I will probably introduce you like that for the person. She's a dear friend. She's a dear ally. She's a Kenyan professor at the University of Nairobi and a writer about financing for development from diverse perspectives, including illicit financial flows and corporate tax. Yeah. And then now she is the current UN independent expert on foreign debt and human rights. And then now we want to listen from Attiya because we have been talking about justice, right? We have been talking about the need for us when we are saying that we want a just and equitable transition, meaning that we want to have a radical transformation on the economic policies. We want fiscal justice, right? And then Attiya yesterday in the press conference say a very interesting thing. She said there will be no climate justice without fiscal justice, right? So Attiya, I want to hear more about that. What does it mean for our economic policies, especially regarding a lot of issues that we have now, especially on debt crisis that's happening all around the globe? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Although you didn't ask me yes, no, or maybe.
Oh, okay.
So I will answer that
Yeah.
anyway. But thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Yes, I'm a little bit soft. So I came, this is my first call. And I came, is that better now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this is my first call. And I came because the title is Climate Finance. So what does that mean for people like me who work in financial and fiscal spaces? And I will tell you that there isn't fiscal justice in the space. And the reason I say that is because I walked into this space and I waited to see all the countries who hadn't given in their obligations, give their obligations, explain why they hadn't given their obligations, explain what they did with the money they were supposed to commit to, which is not a debt ceiling, but a floor. It's a minimum amount they're supposed to commit to. So when we talk about fiscal justice, I really wondered with what face, if you come from Africa or some developing countries, with what face do you bring yourself into the space? And how do you honestly then enter those negotiating rooms, knowing that you haven't fulfilled what you were supposed to fulfill before even entering the space? And I don't see a recognition of that. And I continue to see power resting in the same spaces that they've always rested in. And so debt and international financial obligations is what I work in. And if I look at issues around foreign debt, for me, the first thing that popped up was this whole conversation around debt cancellation. And I will tell you that nobody is able to give me the figures of how much pollution has been emitted since industrialization took place. So we're talking about pollution in the recent past, but what about pollution before that? What about compensation for that pollution? And if we look at that compensation factor, then debt cancellation is not enough. And it's not a charity, it's actually a compensation and a restitution for what has been taking place. So the maths does not balance off. And the maths needs to balance. We have to come into this space with honesty. I've also heard conversations that say, if you ask for debt cancellation, it means you're asking for charity. And so there is a blockage, even in those diplomatic spaces, to ask for it. And I will tell you that it is the responsibility of all states to offer debt cancellation, not to wait for it to be upon request. That we cannot let diplomatic routes block the ability of nations to move forward and the ability of people in the grassroots to have their lives finally being improved. Because I see that. I see the absence of those in vulnerability. In the creation of the loss and profit fund, the more granular, sorry, I keep saying loss and profit fund every time. I think it's a message from above.
Yes.
The loss and damage fund. That is a loss and profit fund. But when I'm looking at the maths around it, it's the profitability that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it's like a paradigm. I'm sorry, guys. But
Loss for us,
But-
profit for them.
because everybody wants it to balance. And it's the balance that's showing its sign. Unfortunately, it's about investment and profitability. And I don't see reference to inclusivity. And frankly, when you move into the financial discussions, the whole debate on human rights changes direction. Because until now, when we talk about human rights, very often it is about the absence of human rights in one part of the world and the presence in another. But when we come and talk about the financing of those same rights, it's actually the absence of finance from that other side of the world in moving it to the side where it belongs. And now that takes me to issues around illicit financial flows, which I know is alien for many of the spaces I've been in at this COP, which really surprised me, because if you're going to talk climate finance, then you have to talk about the profitability and where companies are registered and headquartered and how they are using tax havens and secrecy jurisdictions to channel their profits, and where there are patents of seeds and where royalties are being extracted for it. And it is not in developing countries where the growth is taking place. So we need to have those conversations in the space, and I haven't seen it happening. I would like to stop there, but just to say that climate finance is not going to take place. And fiscal justice is actually the crux of the matter. And I've heard reference to other principles, but the ones that come up for me over and over again, and I've heard it, responsibility of all states, no matter where you come from. Accountability for your commitments, no matter where you've come from. Transparency, so that we believe you and we see the real commitment. Efficiency and effectiveness, of course, because we have to get the value for money. I completely understand that. But all of this must sit in a basket of fairness and justice. And if we lose track of those two, then whether you're efficient or not, you will still be unjust. And so we need to keep those in the center and focus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Attiya. Now we finish our speakers, panelists. We can move on to the questions and discussions. Is there any question from the room, from the press? Yeah, oh, okay. First from the press first, maybe Zhang or anyone? Or maybe we can, we will check later on also from the Zoom. Kavita, I see your hand. Maybe you can go ahead for now, yeah.
From PG, quick, Mr. Attiya. What do you think are some of the international human rights mechanisms, breathing mechanisms in our countries that could really start using accountability and redress on the tech environment? Where we know money is, but that money is not coming through to where it's going. And so much of the discussion around how do we finance the money funding, we know something like this money that's actually coming only different capital. It's going to be money that's going to be earned people that so yeah, and so the other question to that is, you know, what is the right money? Where is the right money? What is the thing that we need?
Thank you. That's a good question, Kavita. Anyone else? There's one question coming. Oh, Martha. Martha, and then I will read the one also from the chat box. Yeah. Martha, wait, yeah, we need your voice. Yeah.
My concern is that I don't understand why we keep diminishing ourselves. Sometimes we recall our first minorities, like a year in my groups in the world. But we talk about, we are developing countries, and they're the developed countries, and then we say that they are the rich, and they're the poor. I think that the language is trying to very much how we see the solution, and we got to make sure of that. And what the teacher was talking about is about accountability, and that accountability is not only about money, it's about how things happen, if they happen as what's done or not. So we have to develop this possibility to do controllership. They have control. The US has a control. The person that does the controllership is not the one that carries the money, right? It's the one that is checking the budget is being fulfilled in the right way. So I think that we do this with the time, but we don't know that, you know, like we have the knowledge, we have the wisdom, and this is a knowledge, all the ways that we have used to share, to be able to be here in spite of COVID. And the major problem that we're having here is that we don't know how to be getting wrong, and we are doing our friends, you know, in family here, and something like that, and then we don't see it. No, we got to figure out that we're here together. We have to make the priority to take time for ourselves instead of out of thinking of going to be determined. So I have to look at the meeting before.
Thank you so much, Martha. We also have question from Fatma. I'm going to ask Fatma to say something because she raised her hand from in the Zoom. How do I do this?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Fatma.
Can you hear me? Yes,
Yes.
thank you for the presentation. I just have maybe a clarification. Could you
Fatma,
kindly
can you say from
Can you
where you
hear
are?
me?
Sorry, Fatma,
Yes,
can you
I'm from Kenya.
Yeah.
I'm from Kenya. So my question, I just needed your viewpoint on whether on the challenges that are encountered by women at the grassroots levels, especially in the global south, in terms of benefiting from COP28. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope we got the question later. No, the challenges faced by the grassroots
That are
women.
yes, in the global south.
Yeah, from the global south. Thank you so much, Fatma. And then also one question we have from Tati Krishnawati. She's from Indonesia. This is, I think, the question that maybe can be answered by all the four of you. What do you think, which are the thematic priorities of COP28 that is more strategic to bring grassroots women voices and rights as the central of the climate action or justice? Yeah? Okay. All right, so maybe for now, we stop the session on question and answer for the first batch, and then I'm going to give it to the speaker who wants to maybe answer first. Yeah, Attiya?
Thank you very much. So there has been a global push for the past 15 years to set up a global tax board. The Nigerians sponsored the resolution. It was just passed by the UN General Assembly like 3 weeks ago on the 23rd of November. the modalities of it are now going to be developed, and whether you are a grassroots organization or an organization anywhere in the world, there is a desperate need globally to have a place to go to where there are shared resources. Now, this resolution is supposed to develop a tax treaty. And this tax treaty will allow you to tap into not only around issues of climate, but could be housing, could be anything. But the point is, we have to make sure that when those discussions are taking place on how to collect this revenue, that the spending needs are made very, very clear as well. Because collection has a lot to do with needs, with wanting to spend as well. And so that focus really needs to be there. And it's right at the beginning, so now is the time. And actually, I have mentioned this in a couple of places. I thought this would be a conversation here. We know there's a process, but there isn't a connection between the two spaces. In the pandemic treaty that is also ongoing, there's also conversations there about illicit financial flows, and there's also conversations about taxation. So all the rights-based entities are looking at this money, and it does exist. And guess what? It's not a new law. There are not going to be new laws on taxes because this is the normal reaction of the field. Illicit financial flows has a lot to do with existing laws where there are too many subsidies or exemptions, predominantly for multinational corporations. So what we need to do is we need to say if a human being is paying 30% taxes, then corporations should pay 30% taxes. That would be the rational argument to it. Right now, some of them pay nothing. Some of them pay 5%. So let's level the playing field. Let's collect the money and let's use it. And these are the conversations that are happening across the world. And this can really help also on the debt side. So they exist, they are pots of money. Talk to me later. I also have to go on to it, so to advantage of that.
So there was a question on what are the different challenges which grassroots women face. I think they are not just at one level, they are at very different levels. So one is technical knowledge in itself, which is, I think, the biggest barrier. So there are many different negotiations happening here on many different topics, but they're all interlinked with each other. So one has to have a very quite a fair, broad understanding. For instance, if it's adaptation is also very closely linked to agriculture. But if you don't have a sense of what adaptation is, it's hard to tease out how does the conversation around adaptation or mitigation impact rural women, whether they are peasant women, they are future focused women, they are influence women. How do we keep track? You know, how much money does it take to bring one woman here? Think about that. And for us, we are struggling to keep track of what is happening here. But if you look at the corporations, they have brought multiple people. I've heard that there are some delegations who have 1,000 people. And we are like 40. Many of us do not speak English fluently. Many of us do not speak any of the imperialist colonial languages very fluently. And why should we? Why should we? And so if we don't have the money to bring in more women who can cover different thematic aspects, that is one. Even if we bring the women, how do we upgrade the technical information that they need to make sense of what is happening? And the third, of course, is the language barrier in itself, because how do we make sense of what is happening? Just now, Attiya was talking about illicit financial flows. Just 3 words, illicit financial flows. It has a depth of history. It has a depth of pages and pages and volumes of what we need to read to figure out what that word means. How can we follow all of that? And they don't let you have the taxes to the very last moment. We had said we will come to the COP a year ago, but we didn't know 5 days before whether we were coming or not. So how do you prepare yourself? You know, you even for a very simple half-an-hour talk, we prepare ourselves. And then the physical space, the heat, the walking. I mean, it's crazy. If you go to one event, you go to the next event for a woman of me, 60 plus, I really have to think about it. Why not then I need to walk back to that pavilion and find a better space? Why? Why are you making it so difficult? This is not by chance. This has been done very systematically to ensure that the civil society spaces, our civil society is not welcome and it is not able to access their spaces easily. So there are much more I can say, but I would like my sisters to also intervene.
Whereas we actually, I echo everything that Azra said. First thing, we fought our way to be here, actually, and when we came here, we had to understand what's happening. We need to learn also the language. That was what Azra was saying a while ago. The language is actually something that we do not encounter in our daily life, so it's very foreign to us. Like just transition, global stocking. These are things that we do not understand. And when we came here, we were lost, to be honest. For the first 2 days, what we did was just walk and discover the things that needs to be seen here for us to be ready for the next days. And so instead of giving us opportunities for us to voice out our voices here in the COP28, we found that our voices are even more marginalized in this space. Representatives from our government do not even listen to us. They do not even know our stories. How can they bring our stories, our daily experiences of the climate crisis to the negotiating table if they do not even know what's happening to our community? How can they intervene in behalf of our communities in terms of the respect of our rights as indigenous peoples and indigenous women if they do not even know what disrespect of our rights mean? There's a huge gap between what's being talked about there in the negotiations and what we are experiencing in our communities. So now if our question is, how can we be more visible? How can grassroots communities be more visible in these spaces so that we can have meaningful participation in the solutions that will be given out at the end of this conference?
I'll share all that has already been mentioned before. Last week, I was attending NCPT, and that what is NCPT? And then followed by LTF, and then there's been today and this week. It's going to be an agreement adopted on Article 6, and that will be 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8. And although then now you see it's not even a language itself, but talking what are those, right? So then rather than follow in and walk you through all the way, what is Article 6, what is 6.2, blah blah blah. So those kind of terminologies that has already been there. So that put in another challenges for us and for the women in the communities as well, even for us as CSOs to closely follow. So and I just would like to address in terms of what would be the strategy to bring in thematic strategy to bring in the voices of the women from the community. I think there is some of the keywords or the themes that we really need to look at and also to talk more is also the word the thing on climate justice. So that means and you could put justice in whatever your work is all about. There will be no climate justice without gender justice. So that would also need to be the core. There no climate justice without human rights, for example. So those will be at the core of the demand for the climate justice. And also the other thing that we really need to to emphasize as well. What has been discussed here, of course, it's a no that women in the communities are not benefiting from the discussion here in the talk. So it's not addressing the systemic change. So it's all business as usual. You know who are the big elephants, but you are not addressing or getting or making sure that they are changing. That the way they are changing is to continue the problem. So that's how what I see as business as usual. So systemic issues are not changed, are not addressed. So that has to be addressed by what we are demanding and what our calls are for the justice and climate justice. Whatever justice and human rights, and also like the fiscal justice as well, food justice, and I think that that's kind of the big word that we really need to have, and that will also be in the other strategy.
Okay, yeah, so that's great. But I think that I want to add a little bit with one question from myself to the panelists. I know we have like very little time, 1 minute. In one sentence, yeah, what do you think is, because we talk about challenges, what do you think the opportunities that we can get from this state? I want to also hear that, right? And then how do we maximize it to amplify the grassroots voices?
I think our strength is always solidarity. That is where we stand. Our collectivity, our connections, our ability to see another woman, look at her, smile, nod, and greet her, not knowing if the face is up, but there is instant connection for many of us from across the continents. And I think we know that one particular country, which I am wearing, I cannot, I think I can Palestine. You know, what happened in Palestine, the kind of massacre, the savagery, the brutality has shown for me, I am 63. For many years, the word imperialism, colonization, capitalism, monopoly capital, were words we used to fight against with all our heart, with everything that we had. And now, these past 2 months have shown us that we were very right in standing and fighting. And coming here has strengthened that solidarity. And it is not only for Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine is defeated. It's not only from the river to the sea, to the mountains, to the oceans, the people are defeated. That is what we.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Azra. And then again, thank you so much, everyone. I don't think that I will not conclude, but I really want to highlight the very importance of solidarity, the very importance of putting justice on the table, right? We need to claim it. It's not only in the negotiation, but how we also claim it on our organizing works, on our going through the street and then rally, right? And then it's all for us. There will be no climate justice without gender justice, right? There will be no climate justice without human rights. And then also there will be no climate justice without a change, a radical change of the system that we have right now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.